I'm about to start my router table build and drew a simple CAD model of it here just to work out the dimensions. And I'm going to cut the joiner using my Screw Advanced box joint jig. But before I start cutting, I figured out which side is the ugly side on all these pieces. And I marked that in for inside. And that way the outside side will be my reference surface, and that always goes against the fence right here. So I'm making 3 cuts per 1/4 inch slot to hog that out, and the final position of the gear for the final stroke determines the exact width of that slot. That joins the top corners. These ones here, the bottom horizontals, I'll have to mortise those in using my slot mortiser. I just gotta mark where all the mortises go. And again, I made sure I have the pieces oriented ugly side in. This marks the end of the mortises, and these lines indicate which side of the line the mortises go on. I got 32 mortises cut, and I cut the tenons the same way as I cut my box joints. But it doesn't go all the way in because I didn't cut these mortises all the way through. And that means I need to shorten the tenons to about this long. So this bottom part here is going to be for a drawer, and the top part is rather large, and that's because it needs to fit one of these filters in there, and also have lots of room for sawdust because this router table is going to be its own dust collector at the same time. I cut a lot of slot mortises in the pieces for the 2 frames, plus slot mortises in the pieces that connect them together. Now I just need to make some floating tenons using these pieces I've already planed and a half round router bit to round the edges. I'm only gluing the floating tenons into the ends of my connecting pieces for now. There, now it's starting to look like a cabinet, but I have to take it right apart again because I have to cut grooves in the sides here for the side panels to go in. And I stacked 2 7¼ inch saw blades in the saw to cut a groove that's wide enough to accept the plywood sides. And for the vertical parts, the groove doesn't go all the way to the ends, so I have to do a plunge cut and then cut not all the way to the other end. I haven't marked how far I need to go on the piece. And then adding a 45-degree bevel to all the edges that will be around the plywood panels. And for the vertical pieces, that bevel doesn't go to either end, so I have to start and stop at just the right spot. And now I can glue the front and back frames together. I'm using clamps to force those box joints or finger joints closed because slow and constant force is much more effective with that viscous glue than it is to try to hammer it together with a mallet. And again, using a long clamp to push those joints together. And now gluing the connecting pieces into one of the frames. doing a dry fit of the panel I cut. As usual, I made the slots and the fit just way too tight and I couldn't even get it down there. So I'm sanding a slight chamfer on all the edges, which will help it glide into that slot as I push it in. And I have to make sure those connecting pieces are parallel, otherwise the tenons won't line up with the mortises in the other frame. I just glued this one in, and I'm about to glue this one in. This holds the floor, and it also connects to here. And I was going to put some glue in here as well, because that will make that bottom connection airtight. But I realized I shouldn't do that, because if I glue that in and it's not in there perfectly aligned this way, there's no way I can get the other frame on. So I'll only put glue down here. Now with the panels and the connecting pieces in this one, I gotta mate it up with this one, and that's the worst glue up because there's 9 mortise and tenon joints that have to come together. And as usual, temporarily putting on some clamps to push those joints closed. That came together well enough. Panels in the side, and those bevels I routed around the panels, those meet in the corners like that. I think I'll carve those square. So these joints in here and the many mortise and tenon joints here and here really protect this thing against rocking, which is why I've got it set up like that. One side is off the ground just to show off the rigidity. And it can easily hold my weight like this, even though there's no bracing and no panel in there. But I'm not going to jump on it like this because by my guesstimation, I've only got about a factor of 6 safety margin for supporting my weight like this, and the impact of a jump could exceed that. All right, it had to be done. And that router table will become a new home for my tilting router lift, which I haven't actually used since a couple of moves because I haven't actually mounted that piece on the table saw anymore. And I'm just attaching a couple of pieces of scrap to it so I can place it in the router table to get a sense of how it's going to fit in there. I still have a lot of work to do finishing up that router table and figuring out how the integrated dust collection is going to work, but that will be another video.